Okay, this is our submission for the 3602 Inquiry Project. We're doing a podcast. Welcome to the Jen LaGranger Fan Club podcast. This is episode 1, first of many, I am sure. What we'll start off doing is we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll kind of introduce our inquiry subject. And so we'll start.
My name is Andrew Denton. I am a general science major and a math education major.
Awesome.
I'm Kyle Dawson. I'm a physical education and kinesiology major.
And I'm Cody Friesen, and I am a social studies education major. And so the subject that we decided to go with ADHD for Inquiry Project. And we'll talk about that specific inquiry question in a minute as well. Before we do that, we just want to go over kind of how we divide the workload, how we decide to research this. And so the way that we decided to research this is we found a bunch of relevant scholarly articles and resources that described the classroom experience of students with ADHD, both in PE classrooms and the more academic subjects. When I say academic subjects, I mean core subjects like social studies, English, math, science. And so we found, I believe, 9 scholarly articles.
Yeah.
We each tackled 3 of them. And what we did is we just kind of compiled information from those articles and how they fit into our inquiry question, which we will get into as well. And so our inquiry question is this: how can students with ADHD experience in PE and the academic subjects? How do those experiences differ? And how can the positive aspects of those experiences, the aspects of them that make students successful, how can they be bridged to help them succeed in all subjects? So what can we learn from physical education? How do students with ADHD succeed? How are they benefited by a PE classroom? And can any of those techniques be bridged over to the academic subjects and vice versa? And so we chose this for a number of reasons. The demographics were, at least for me, a big part of this, right? I know that as we were doing our research, we all came across this statistic that 3 to 5% of the student population is affected by ADHD. And so we'll talk about a little bit about that. I guess what we should do is we should I guess discuss kind of why we chose this subject.
Yeah.
Why was this relevant for you, Andrew?
It was relevant for me just because, like in my past, with my history, I've worked with a lot of kids with ADHD, and I think in the classroom, it's definitely very beneficial for us to understand ADHD, understand how it affects our students, and in what ways we can help our students to succeed in all subjects in the classroom.
Yeah, for sure. Going on along with that, like ADHD is one of the most prevalent learning disorders that we see in the classroom, especially modern day. And as like future educators, it's important for us to tackle. A lot of the reason why I was really interested in it as well is I have a younger brother with ADHD as well. So like learning like techniques to help him succeed in school. I think a big part of why we tackled this topic, and like specifically our inquiry question, is seeing that we were all from different academic backgrounds in our subject major, and we really wanted to look at how ADHD was shown differently across our subject majors and sort of like how to cross-curricularly benefit students with ADHD.
Yeah, exactly.
No, big time. I'm much in the same boat, right? Like it affects a lot of people. The cross-curricular motivation is definitely there for me too. Another thing that's just stood out to me throughout the coursework that we've been doing is that a lot of the in-class implementations to help students with ADHD help everyone involved,
yes,
right? So like
exactly.
the things like having like visual representations of like the class schedule, the use of agendas and other like self-regulation and discipline techniques, they benefit everyone,
yes.
right? So the more you learn about this, the more that you can actually maybe just learn to help everyone involved at the same time. So you're getting a lot done at once by becoming more familiar with this subject material. We already talked a little bit about demographics, right? It affects 3 to 5% of the student population, right? It's the most commonly diagnosed behavioral disorder, as you mentioned, Kyle, in children. Another thing that we've come across in the research and even just in our class discussions is that males are more presenting than females. And so would one of you want to speak to that? What does that look like? Did you uncover anything in your research regarding that?
I can speak to it. I think more from like our classroom discussion, but like I think a big part of the presentation of like its prevalence in males over females. We discussed how the social implications and like the societal I guess expectations of girls versus boys and how that may differ in how ADHD presents in both, and then also just the research. The research has been done predominantly with boys, so that's usually where it's getting diagnosed, where the research with it in girls is kind of lagging behind. I think it's starting to begin and starting to be a thing that's more prevalent, but I think we still got a ways to go.
Yeah, still very limited.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, that already touches on a number of like the challenges that we see in students with ADHD in the classroom as well, right? And so, in beginning this project and this inquiry, we want to kind of identify some of the challenges that students encounter in the classroom when they're struggling with ADHD.
Yeah.
Kyle, do you want to speak?
Yeah,
to
I can touch on that.
Yeah.
We see that students with ADHD have a harder time focusing, so they have like inattention and impulsiveness along with hyperactivity, and a lot of the times this leads to not being able to submit work due on deadlines in time or being able to focus long enough to learn. So because of that, it leads to a lot of like academic underachievement or poor academic performance and educational problems. The big thing is really just the focus aspect of it. It's hard for them to focus on the work presented in front of them. And then a big problem with that is the problems with executive functions that people with ADHD experience. If you want to touch on that more, Andrew, that'd be my guess.
Executive functioning deficits are like prevalent with ADHD, and that's kind of like one of the primary things. So that can like affect planning, organization, maintaining effort, and self-monitoring activities. So like monitoring time, when you're gonna do certain activities, etc. And like as a result, we kind of see with some of these challenges in the school system that students with ADHD score significantly lower on reading and math tests than other students, and that's by about 2/3 of a standard, or 2/3 of a standard deviation below their peers, which one of our sources cited.
Awesome. So we already kind of talked about what our inquiry question is, and so our inquiry question is again, just as a reminder, it's this: how can students with ADHD experience success cross-curricularly in PE and the academic subjects, and what strategies can be adopted from PE and the academic subjects that are going to help cross-curricularly. And so we kind of decided on that kind of by virtue of our diversity of majors. And so Kyle's a PE major, a kinesiology guy. I'm social studies. Andrew is the maths and the sciences. And so just given the diversity there, we want to kind of capitalize on that throughout this inquiry project. And so we were operating under an interesting assumption. And so we had this hypothesis that students with ADHD would excel in a physical education classroom setting just by virtue of there being opportunities for a lot of just like physical movement, right? And so, you even see it in the abbreviation rates, like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? And so we thought that hyperactivity component of the disorder would make it so that they would have an opportunity to succeed in a PE classroom relatively easily, unobstructed. That was our hypothesis. And so, but as we were doing our research, and I believe that we all uncovered this as we were doing our independent research with our different sources, we came to the conclusion that that's very much not the case. We came to the conclusion instead that students with ADHD similarly struggle in the PE classroom. They just struggle in maybe slightly different ways, or ways that you might not expect. And just because there's physical activity happening in a PE classroom does not mean that they get away with just an easy experience in that way. And so that hypothesis was incorrect. And so throughout our research, we uncovered a couple of ways that students with ADHD struggle in the classroom, and just things that when you think about, it's like, oh yeah, it's like, well, that definitely makes sense. And so some of the things that I encountered, and I'll let you two speak to it in a moment as well, one of the things that I encountered was trouble taking turns, right? It's like students in a PE classroom will have trouble taking turns, trouble sometimes managing excitement, and of course all of this is going to be affected by the severity of the ADHD they experience, their age, if self-regulation techniques have been taught to them, supports at home. There's a variety of things, right? But the students with ADHD are likely going to have a harder time with these things, right? So trouble taking turns was certainly one of them. ADHD can be more challenging for physical educators, one of our articles said. These teaching environments are more distracting and dangerous than traditional classrooms. And our curriculum offers more opportunities for students to ridicule and reject their peers with ADHD. And so we see, unfortunately, a difficult social component to this as well, where students with ADHD might get more bullied or ostracized in a PE classroom than a traditional classroom. So we saw that. Andrew, did you want to speak to some of the other points regarding that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, while some students with ADHD are gifted and like can go on to be like gifted athletes, the vast majority of them have difficulty with their coordination and motor skills, is what we're finding in some of our articles. And then also some students with ADHD can also have troubles with managing their frustration levels and kind of that emotional piece. So like, again, what Cody was saying with some of those self-regulation supports, like some of them have them, some of them don't as much, and that's something to also be cognitive of. And then also, kind of like that unwillingness to participate in certain activities because of their negative chance of success. And then also, again, what Cody was saying about like that social ostracization. If you're being perceived negatively by your peers, you may not want to participate in the activities to the same extent.
Yeah, I think just going off of what you guys have previously mentioned, I feel like the physical education classroom is a lot less structured or routine than a typical classroom. There's not really like the presentation of a visual schedule that you would have for a student with ADHD. So I think a lot of the physical structure of physical education classroom really develops a lot more problems. Like it's a lot more chaotic, there's a lot more going on, and it can often lead to like sensory overload almost.
Yeah.
Big time. And so that's where our inquiry question comes into play, right? Because we assume that students would have an easy time in the PE classroom. We definitely encountered that that's not the case. However, in the PE classroom, we did discover that there were certain supports and strategies in place that allowed for a different type of success for ADHD students than what is often seen in the traditional classroom. So the question becomes like, okay, it's like, are there things being done in a PE classroom that are not really being done much else, or at least thought of in this way, that could benefit students cross-curricularly? And so we'll talk about a couple of the benefits there. Andrew, do you want to start with some of the benefits of in a PE classroom for students with ADHD?
Yeah, so one of the benefits is they can help learn skills that will help manage their ADHD in a way or an environment that's a little easier than some of those more academic courses. Just so I think with that flexibility of the structure within a PE classroom, and like with that particularly the goal setting aspect and task management, as well as having a class designated to being a physical outlet will lead to students being able to focus better in other subjects. That comes from some of the research we were finding. Do you want to cover some of the
exactly. I found with my articles, and I'm sure with your guys' as well, there's evidence that exercise can increase memory, attention, and spatial perception, as well as language and emotion. I think that's really important for boosting student motivation even as well. It really demonstrates the increased need for physical education classes of students with ADHD as well. Like a lot of times, I know in one of my articles it says that because students need to catch up on their classwork, they're often like revoked recess time or gym time to work on their schoolwork. So they're really focusing on the academic side, but taking away from that physical outlet, which is shown to improve memory and help with like focus on other stuff.
Big time. And so this kind of gets to the meat of what we want to talk about, our biggest points, right? We wanted to talk about what things can be implemented from a PE classroom, strategies that can be adopted from a PE classroom. Was it Andrew or Kyle that was going to talk about that?
Yeah,
Andrew.
Andrew, if you can speak to just things that could be implemented, strategies that can be stolen from the PE setting that can benefit students cross-curricularly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I'm going to start with a little quote from one of our articles that they were kind of saying, because they were kind of talking about some of the struggles the students with ADHD have, but they kind of ended that with saying, fortunately, by making a few adaptations, you can make your class a place where students with ADHD not only succeed, but also learn skills to help them manage their disorder. And that was coming from the PE side of it, and I felt like that was a good lead into this discussion of like kind of things we can take from the more academic perspective from the PE classroom. So one of them was through the chunking of tasks. This is one of the strategies. Through chunking tasks, you can help students kind of help with that executive functioning aspect, with making the tasks smaller and easier to manage. And we kind of talked about having that in conjunction with physical breaks. So it gives those students a time to reset, but also to refocus. And we kind of had that refocusing piece in there, kind of from kind of some of the studies that Kyle was talking about, where they were talking about how that physical outlet can actually help with the focusing. So we thought that would be a good idea. One of our other ones was PE programs can have a significant impact on the lives of students with ADHD and helping promote positive relations with their other classmates, just because it is a space where collaboration and cooperation is just so much more present through the use of games, and sports, and different activities, where in the classroom it may not be to the same extent. So it kind of, if framed right and done in kind of that safe and inclusive environment within the PE setting, can be extremely beneficial for that student or students in all of their classroom settings. And another one we found was just like because of the benefit that PE and that physical outlet has for students, especially students with ADHD, but I think we could probably say all students generally, we caution against kind of revoking PE or recess from kids as like a disciplinary measure, even if it is to like get caught up on work, just because for a lot of kids that is such a important part of their day. And again, like we talked about some of those benefits of having that physical outlet, and by allowing them to have that, we kind of set them up for success for the later on in the day, right? And then I think one of our last points was, and it's been seen that students with ADHD can tend to wish to work in a group to hide their failures. So kind of talking about that social aspect, and how when you're in the group, they kind of feel more sheltered, and that their anxiety about having errors or doing something wrong kind of gets diminished because you're in that group setting. So we kind of talked about like working in, like kind of having more group work allowed for, and kind of be flexible in that way so our students can have that to rely on. And then our final point on that was one source suggested that goal setting and persistence as important self-regulation tools for students with ADHD. Participation in physical education and physical activity courses can be an important tool in teaching these techniques and personal skills. So kind of through physical education, it's able to kind of foster a place for our students to learn and use those tools, and then in the classroom we can even help hone that and refine that with them. So yeah.
Awesome. And so we want to look at the other side of that too, right? It's like, well, what does it look like? What can be taken from what supports and strategies for ADHD students do we see in the more academic settings, and what aspects of those strategies can be brought into the PE classroom to better support students as well? Because as our research pointed out, right, it's like it's not like they have an easy time in physical education. They have a different time, but it's difficult nevertheless, right? Mm-hmm. So what can be done for them? What strategies did you uncover?
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting that not only can PE applications apply for the academics, but the academic classroom sort of pieces that we take from that we normally see in that can also be applied into a PE setting. Some of the stuff I found was like the use of gathering attention and keeping them focused on actions with constant cues and reminders. Like often at a desk, you'll see the teacher walk around and constantly remind them to stay on topic, but in a physical education classroom, they sort of just let them go at it. But I think it's also important to give them those constant cues and reminders in that setting as well. A big thing they talk about is involving students with ADHD in classroom examples, and just really making sure they're involved the entire time. So they're never sitting around waiting, they're bored, but that they're always constantly doing something, even during the instruction time. Along with this is generically limiting the number of instructions, so you're not putting so much on their cognitive plate. Important part in the classroom, but also in the physical education classroom. Just like keep it simple, stupid. We've all heard that before, but it applies everywhere. Another thing they mentioned is like along with that group work almost is pairing students with ADHD with more mature students to like if you have a team building game or like team games of any sort, you can really pair them off so that another student will foster their learning to keep them focused for most of the time. A big part that I know I talk a lot about in my CNI classes and stuff too is making sure the entire class time is spent on engagement and activities. So kids are getting a lot of activity and it's not a lot of instruction time. Another thing they talk about is like individualizing drills for them and being flexible to how they want to participate, and along with that is being prepared for anything that could happen. A big thing is the implementation of routine, organization, and schedules, as well as transition warnings. I feel like a lot of times in PE it's sort of cut short, very brief, gather everyone's attention, move on. But the importance of warning people before transitions is very important. Another thing they talk about is like the fostering of relationships amongst the peers in a physical education classroom, as well as having positive feedback. So constantly throughout the lessons in a PE class, you want to be giving them good reminders like, thank you for following instructions, you're doing such a great job with this, and just really giving them the positive feedback. And then another like more direct implementation is having academics involved in activities in a physical education classroom. So like an example of a lesson would be like you're playing four corners and you ask a trivia question, ask them to run to which corner they think the right answer is, and that's just an example of like teaching something from the academic realm but in an activity setting.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, what really stands out to me is your second last point, the fostering relationships point, because everything really hinges on that, right? Because fostering relationships is going to dictate your classroom culture, and if your classroom culture is suffering, if there isn't a culture in your classroom of taking care of everyone, regardless of what learning disability or if they have ADHD or a physical disability, whatever the case may be, right? There has to be that culture of taking care of one another and having patience with one another, right? And so it's like, if you want to foster that relationship, like you're going to have patience for the students that maybe say something out of turn or act out or have like a weird behavior every once in a while. Because when you have that patience, then all the other students in that classroom are going to follow your lead, right? And so if you want to see not just them succeed academically, but succeed socially as well, that starts with the culture. So I love that you brought that up. That brings us to the end. I hope that this has been beneficial for everyone listening. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks.